Hi everyone, I'm Henry calling in from Prague, Czech Republic right now, and we're going to talk about vertical farming. But actually, as I thought more about this question today, which is about resilience, I want to talk about urban farming first. You understand that because vertical farming is just a component of it. And it's really important to understand how urban farming plays into resilience and the role of vertical farming within that. So that's my objective today in a very brief conversation. If you want to contact me, you can find me on LinkedIn. It's in the chat. You can email me, or you can follow me on Twitter at the Agritech. This is a little bit about me. I'm an AgTech speaker. I'm a global consultant, been doing that for about 10 years now. And I have some education across sustainability, food security, and urban agriculture. So I want to just go back a little bit. I want to go back to World War I and World War II. And there's some things we can learn from those periods of time about resilience and urban agriculture. And this is something I actually spoke about at a TEDx talk in partnership with Thought for Food and the amazing Christine Gould, who will be speaking up next. But when we go back to World War I and World War II, populations all around the world experienced supply chain threats to their food. Food prices, food access, all of this was threatened. And you know what governments did in both the Allied nations as well as in Germany? They actually encouraged residents to grow their own food, not only at home, but also in churches, in schools, etc. And these were called victory gardens. That was what the Allies really called it in the UK and in the US. And these gardens had an enormous impact. In fact, in World War II, 40% of US fruits and vegetables were grown in victory gardens, 40%. And actually these urban gardens collaborated with rural farms so that rural farms could grow things like soy and corn and wheat and animals that are not realistic to grow in the city. So that's one example. And this is sort of how they promoted it and encouraged it. And people really worked together and were able to be resilient to that very, very difficult period of time, both in World War I and World War II. We can also look at other examples of resilience from completely different countries. For example, Cuba, as the Soviet Union started to collapse, its dependence on fertilizers, pesticides, seeds from the Soviet Union also collapsed. Again, a supply chain threat. And so Cuba had to initiate its own types of victory gardens. And Havana built 8,000 different urban farms across rooftops and vacant spaces and was able to be resilient to those shocks in the system and has some incredible cases of urban agriculture and organic urban agriculture. Looking towards the pandemic, we can look at places like Nairobi, where people had to adapt to the supply chain threats from COVID-19 and grow their own food. And this was, of course, because of a lack of jobs and access. They had limited capacity to buy food that they typically could, so they worked together to grow their own food. We can also look in Chiang Mai, a place that was very dependent upon tourists. Once the tourists dried up in COVID-19, community members got together and grew their own food to supplement that. These are all ways of being resilient. A shock happens, and I'm resilient because I can work with my neighbors or alone to grow our own food. But I want to ask you all a question. If we had these shocks now in the developed world, right, where we think we've figured it all out, would we be able to adapt? Would we be able to grow 40% of our fruits and vegetables? I certainly didn't grow up knowing how to do this. It wasn't until I was a teenager, my parents dragged me to the countryside as they were trying to reconnect with nature, that they forced me to learn all of these aspects. And even then, I have a fraction of the knowledge that my parents do. And so we're losing this knowledge generation after generation. And so one of my main arguments for urban agriculture of all kinds is that it teaches us key skills to be resilient to the inevitable shocks in our system related to food. And we are not nearly prepared enough for the future shocks that are coming, whether it's climate change, more pandemics, or more wars and crises, unfortunately. So again, a little bit more about why urban agriculture now. Some of this is very clear. I'm going to go through it pretty quickly. But there's also consumer demand. Consumers want more local food. They value it more. So there's an economic case for growing more of this food in the city. Community gardens, as I mentioned, can bring people together. This is me at our country house, actually over our 24 different raised beds. My dad's quite an ambitious gardener and looks like I'm working on the French beans there to try and harvest them. And he caught me in that moment. But they really bring people together, whether it's me and my parents, whether it's you and your neighbors, whether it's, there's a lot of evidence actually of immigrant populations being brought into communities where they share recipes and language in these spaces. There's also inequality in the urban environment that can be solved or at least improved by this. For example, Atlanta has 25% food insecure residents, but they have all these vacant spaces. Those vacant spaces can be converted into urban farms, and they are by the Atlanta Grows a Lot program. And suddenly the equity between these various communities that have been left behind versus those that have advantages starts to get a bit more balanced out as we subsidize and support and help lift up those people that haven't had the privilege to get real and good food in their lives. Climate change, I already mentioned, we really need to grow more food. We need to be more resilient. We need to distribute it better. All of those reasons, because the fragility of our system is becoming more and more demonstrated. We also have farmers that are getting older. And what we know is that as farmers get older, their children tend to move to the city. You actually don't hear many parents these days saying, I think you should be a farmer. They tell you should be a lawyer or an investor or an accountant or work for the city like Evan does. These are all exciting jobs, but farming hasn't really been considered a sexy, profitable endeavor. So we're losing farmers all around the developed world, which is creating a looming crisis as well. And we also become disconnected from nature. Agriculture is a way for us to connect with nature. So if we bring urban agriculture into the city, it can improve our mental health, our physical health, and it can help us live more green. So again, I obviously am a big fan of urban agriculture, and this is the impact I believe it can make across so many different categories. I mean, I could go on and on and on and on about why this is so beneficial for cities to invest more in. But let's take a step back. I want you to understand vertical farming in the context of urban agriculture. This is a very simple spectrum of urban agriculture. Most of these farms, all of them are real. Most of them are in New York. Aero Farms is very nearby New York. Okay, so Battery Park Urban Farm is a sort of typical community garden outdoors in a park. You can walk up to it, you can learn, you can take workshops. While on the other side, we have Aero Farms, which produces 2 million pounds of leafy greens per year using much less water, much less land, and they do it year round. And they produce tons of jobs. And then you have everything in the middle from rooftop farms and greenhouses, and each of them have different benefits. And that's how we think like an Agritech. Is what is the pro and con of each of these methods, and how can we lay them out across the city's canvas to achieve the resilience goal that we want? So think about it right now. What are some of the benefits of a community garden that a vertical farm that's high-tech and indoors can't provide, and vice versa? We can look at that a little bit from an environmental perspective. Rooftop greenhouses provide insulation to buildings. Rooftop soil-based farms provide stormwater management. Soil-based farms provide biodiversity and reduce heat island effect and can be ways to manage organic waste. But vertical farms are exciting because you can put them in all kinds of spaces, basements, empty warehouses, etc. They also use 90% less water, depending on what kind of farm, but that's the typical claim. And they have much less food miles for high volumes of product because they can be close to the consumer. But again, there's pros and cons. Vertical farms tend to have a higher carbon footprint because of the energy needed to light them. They have very significant upfront costs that make it difficult for people with less privilege to build them and develop them. But they have a lot of benefits around reducing pesticides, etc. You can see that here. Another way to think about this, just briefly, is 6 different impact categories. If you go back to this chart, you can rate all of these across these 6 impact categories. The social impact, economic impact, environmental, the triple bottom line of sustainability, and an additional 3, like the aesthetic impact, health, and education. So try to think strategically about that. Community gardens tend to have higher impact on environmental impacts like water management and biodiversity, and social impacts like community engagement, but vertical farms tend to have larger economic impact, and in some places can have beneficial environmental impacts from the reduction of arable land use and reduction of pesticide use and water use. But there is no one size fits all, and that's why it's important to use design thinking to understand all the options available and plan for resilience strategically. So just to finish up, we provide services to help design these farms of all kinds, to understand them for various stakeholders. We work with cities, we work with investors, we work with entrepreneurs, we work with large corporations. These are all part of the 200 past clients we've had in 40 countries that are all working in urban agriculture. But we also have a software where you can take online classes and learn the best practices for greenhouses and vertical farms. You can model any greenhouse or vertical farm and get the key economic metrics. And you can even learn about the main equipment suppliers and financing providers that could help you get started. So we're democratizing the basics of greenhouse and vertical farming, so you don't need to hire a consultant, but you can actually do a lot of this on your own from your home computer at design.agritecture.com. Thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to your questions.
Excellent presentation. Thank you so much, Henry, for sharing this. I would continue to Christina. Christina, your...
All right, I'm going to share my screen. And thank you so much, Henry, for that amazingly, as always, energizing, thought-provoking presentation that also really plays into some of the things that I want to talk about today. So hi, everyone. I am Christine, founder and CEO of an organization called Thought for Food. I'll talk a little bit about what we do and why, but I want to kind of first set the context about, why it's so important to think about resiliency. I think we've all heard by now the findings of the recent IPCC report that it is code red for humanity. We have to, really address some urgent existential crises that really at the core of is our food system and agriculture. Actually, our food system is responsible for feeding 10 billion people by 2050. But it's also, using over 60%, it's contributing, my children are screaming in the background, my apologies. It's contributing to 68% biodiversity loss, 40% of our world's land use, and is responsible for 1/3 of GHG emissions. That's about 51 billion tons annually. And so, the impacts are felt by all of us everywhere. We're experiencing the hottest temperatures on record. We're seeing that our natural resources are being depleted and we're surpassing our planetary boundaries. When it comes to our oceans, we're seeing that we're overfishing those and that they're filled with plastic waste. And at the same time, with regard to all of these environmental challenges, we have, impact on our own, health and well-being. With over 1 billion people starving, we have people facing malnutrition. And this is actually tragically on the rise for the first time in a decade due to a confluence of factors, COVID and climate change, and of course, the ongoing conflicts. And sadly, while we have these situations with, people going hungry, we are also wasting over 1/3 of our food at various parts of the value chain. And as I mentioned, we are in an unprecedented time with this convergence of those factors of climate change, with the dire impacts being exacerbated by the ongoing conflicts. Of course, one of the biggest one is what's happening in Russia and Ukraine. But there are conflicts all over the world, a lot of them predicated by food system breakages, where people go hungry, conflicts tend to occur. And, with climate change, we're seeing droughts then lead to that food insecurity. And so, many experts are predicting that there will be an increase in conflicts and wars going forward. So we need to fix this, and soon. Something also to keep front in mind is that, we've been talking about resiliency, and food and agriculture, the way that it's built right now, our food system is very much, built for industrial systems. It's been optimized. And through that, we've been actually able to, get to the point where we can produce enough calories for the 7 to 8 billion people that exist today. But it's not, as mentioned before, not being distributed to everyone everywhere in the way that it is intended to. And it's also not nourishing people in the way that it should be. And so there's the opportunity to really look at how we can disrupt the sector so that we can look at how nature innovates and how nature is bringing transformation. And that is not through linear optimal processes. It's through constant ongoing experiments happening everywhere all the time. And this is something that we have the chance to do, and I believe is very much enabled by digital technologies. And so what we have a lens on at Thought for Food is how we can take agriculture, which is the least digitized industry sector in the world, and bring in digital transformation and use digital technologies to allow us to connect with each other, to learn from each other, share and grow, more effectively, so that all of our individual innovation efforts can be accelerated. We also know, and Henry talked about this, that the average age of the world's farmers is over 65. And as he talked about, not many parents are telling their kids to go into farming. It's a sector that's very stigmatized. It's seen as having poor prospects. And in many parts of the world, it's like, if you want to make a life for yourself and your family and for the future, please go to the cities, where there's more economic opportunities. So how can we reposition food and agriculture as a sector filled with prospects and filled with energy and innovation opportunities? And lastly, when we think about our food system, we know that currently, because of that optimization and efficiency, it's dominated by a few incumbent players who've been operating by the same rules for decades. So we have the big agrochemical giants, we have food brands that I'm sure you all have seen the infographic that most of the foods we eat are really, held under corporate control of a few leading companies. So how can we bring in new startups everywhere who are constantly innovating and building these locally relevant solutions, sharing and collaborating with each other through digital technologies so that we can start to become more resilient to shocks that have come our way and will continue to come our way? And this is what the Thought for Food model has actually, been designed to do. What we're doing is unleashing innovation in every part of the world, locally relevant innovation that, like I said, can be accelerated through global collaboration. So, we have this really, unique operating model that's quite decentralized. Even before that was the cool thing to do, in the Web3 space. But we have really been able to build this global community or movement, if you will, of tens of thousands of innovators who are ready to roll up their sleeves, get excited about the opportunities to innovate in food and ag, and develop solutions. And at Thought for Food, we're helping them to coordinate their efforts and also attract investment, whether that be through corporate investment or, impact investors or VCs, so that they can all scale their impact in the right way. And we do this by really engaging innovators, exciting them about this space. So Henry's been part of this journey with me, but, we're bringing a little bit of that Netflix, TikTok culture into food and ag, showing people this is, there are real, serious, massive challenges to solve, but we can talk to them about, all of the different ways that, we can solve them by tapping into our own cultures, our own disciplinary areas of expertise, and showing them what's possible, and bringing that energy and vibrancy that has actually worked to transform tech. Back a decade ago, tech was attracting all of the greatest talents because they were building a culture, a startup culture that people wanted to be part of. And what we're doing is building an agriculture or counterculture that people want to be part of and contribute to. And then we're able to accelerate those best solutions, connect them, like I said, to partners that can help them really scale their impact. And you might be wondering, what are we seeing? Well, our organization runs the largest and most diverse innovation challenge in the sector. And through that, we're able to really identify these types of diverse solutions that are being developed and deployed in now over 180 countries. And this is a quick snapshot of some of the, exciting trends that we're seeing and how, particularly young people are bringing forward their digital savviness, their global mindedness, and their collaborative spirit and their entrepreneurial drive to, see things that have never been done before in the industry. And so this shows you that the section of this slide that really excites me are the next gen approaches. We're seeing that in addition to leveraging extremely powerful technologies that are getting faster, cheaper, easier to use year on year, they're also saying, how can we pair that to, bring nutrition and health to more people, to solve the biggest environmental challenges, to make sure that we can address climate change, not only mitigate climate change, but also, really capture and sequester carbon for centuries to come. But they're doing this by tapping into these new values that aren't just focused on winner takes all IP heavy business strategies, but around how they can foster more collaborative and open source business models, how they can tap into, indigenous innovation and indigenous technologies and make those combined with, some of the most cutting edge AI and machine learning platforms, and how they can really design for resiliency and regeneration and prevent some of these issues from the very outset. We've seen, in the past 8 years that we've been alive, we've seen a slew of solutions all over the world at every part of the value chain. And we've helped to launch 100 startups of those. But I wanted to just touch on a few areas that really excite me. You've probably heard some people talking about alternative proteins, and we've seen a bunch of companies being launched that are IPOing and turning into unicorns, bringing either plant-based or cell-based meat, to the world. But what I see in my vantage point is that there are now these next-gen innovators and new slew of startups that are coming in and taking synthetic biology, cellular agriculture, fermentation techniques, and applying them to foods from their own country. So not just another burger, but actually like looking at what is a culturally relevant food and making a plant-based alternative for that, or a cell-based alternative. And in fact, we've seen a number of these cell-based companies popping up across the Middle East, South Asia, and Africa. I love also the potential around carbon farming and regenerative agriculture, where we're looking at market mechanisms that can get farmers paid into the carbon credit market, where there's so much demand right now. There's so much demand, not enough supply. And now, thanks to technology becoming more powerful, we're able to get verified, transparent credits at scale that can actually be a meaningful factor into this growing, market. And then, of course, vertical farming. I always, first of all, that was such a great presentation of Henry to show all of the different parts of, from community gardens through to large scale, vertical farms and greenhouses and everything in between. But for me, what I see with the next generation of innovators, vertical farming is like the gateway into every possibility of agriculture, because it's so accessible. It allows people to come in and learn about food and tinker and build and collaborate. And through that, they deepen their understanding and love and passion for how food is produced. They start to understand more about the role that nutrition can play, soil, lighting, photosynthesis, everything starts to become more, exciting and obvious to them. And that then leads them into all kinds of solution spaces. So for me, vertical farming, the earlier we can get our children in every part of the world into, building their modules or into farming and community gardens, the better all of us will be, because this really is the way to get people excited in so many different spaces. I just wanted to say one more thing. Just like Henry has his software, we have a digital platform that is all about, again, helping to people around the world coordinate with each other and collaborate so they can, do things better and more effectively. And so our digital lab platform not only provides like on-demand master classes and learning modules, including some from Agritecture, but we have open source data sets and hardware blueprints that are freely accessible, so that if you are beginning your innovation journey, you don't have to start from scratch. You can start with some best-in-class resources that, again, allow you to go further faster. And we have a number of great partners that, continue to, help us grow and develop this digital labs platform, which is freely available to innovators around the world. And we are, pretty much, we have an unparalleled access to the next generation of food and agri-tech innovators. We're at 30,000 and counting. We're in 183 countries, and we have a very decentralized operating model that gives us real boots on the ground access to these innovators. So we're able to find these locally relevant solutions, bring them into our programs, and help to really, accelerate everything that they're doing, take it to the next level. And through this, we believe we can create transformation without having to go to that old, outdated model of scale equals efficiency. Winner takes all is how the business model, needs to work. So we're really not only showing all of these new innovations, but really uprooting what it means to have an innovation engine that's decentralized, that can change things up. So yeah, I just wanted to say that I think that there's so much to do to accelerate green development. We need to attract innovation. We need to attract talent. We need to attract investment. And this whole play of urban farming and vertical farming is like such a great entry point, and also a point that can really make a huge difference. And some of the challenges too that Henry mentioned around energy costs and CO2 emissions. I mean, we're already seeing people looking at each of those problems and saying, how can we solve that? And that is really exciting to see. So we need to continue to push the boundaries of what's possible in all of these spaces and make, our food system systems more inclusive, more transparent, more regenerative. And then we have a chance of really leading ourselves to a world of abundance. So thank you very much. I just wanted to mention one last plug. New York City, September 30th, we're going to be coming together for an in-person event called Generation Fest. This is in partnership with New York City AgTech Week and Climate Week. And we would love to have anybody who's around there do contact me for more information. But we have everyone from food to agriculture to Web3 to climate tech and renewable energy, all going to be congregating to build the next generation version of the world. I look forward to your questions.
Beautiful, Christina. That was a sprint through the topic. Excellent presentation. Thank you so much, and a wonderful bridge to Even. So Saida would be then in the end. Even if you would like to take the word, we would welcome your perspective on on the planning and what's the idea in terms of
Sure.
city.
Sure. Yeah. Great to be here. A lot of exciting stuff going on. Tough acts to follow, actually, Henry and Christine both. But I will do my best. Actually, yeah, there's no way I could be any more articulate than those two already have been, just as far as the landscape and what it looks like and what the possibilities are. And that's why it's really great to be on with these two stellar people. And I just want to be on here briefly. Actually, I don't have a presentation. I just want to sort of say a few words about this new Office of Urban Agriculture that is about to be established. So I'm Evan Burr, policy advisor to the mayor. I got tasked with standing this office up, and it's about to launch, actually. ETA on that is probably September, although we don't have a date certain yet. But yeah, there's a lot of exciting possibility, I think, here, because I think Christine is right. I think there is a kind of a window of opportunity. I think this is becoming a thing that people sort of broadly see should and actually has to happen, right? So I love that Henry mentioned the World War II era victory gardens, because my grandmother had a victory garden. She still called it that all those years later. I used to help her in it, when I was 3 years old, 4 years old, some of my earliest memories. And it's true. I heard stories from them, actually, from my grandparents. People actually depended on these for food. I mean, it was like that you fed your family with this garden, And so as we get into these food challenges, cities actually in particular are going to have to look out for this stuff a whole lot more than we have been. Agritecture had an interesting piece actually recently that essentially said that cities haven't been up to snuff on this enough. They haven't paid enough attention to it overall across the country. And he's right. I think this is kind of beginning to sort of dawn on everybody right now that this is something that cities have to tackle, and they have to really kind of put some focus on it and put some investment into it also. So that's what this new Office of Urban Agriculture hopes to do. We want to engage stellar experts like Henry and Christine and others in this, and we want to basically address several fronts actually of urban ag, from workforce development to economic development, help for startup urban agriculture businesses and things like that, to food systems. That's going to be a major focus, because it has to be. I mean, essentially, I think this new era, the COVID era, actually one of the positive outcomes of the COVID era is that it forced people to pay attention to the fact that our supply chains are really not very strong, not very resilient. So what's great about all of this put together is I think there really is a window of opportunity now to get things done, because I think there's an appetite now that people have actually to suddenly do this. And we have top-down leadership from the mayor finally in New York City to do this. This is a priority of his, actually, this office. So we are going to be looking to do that. You can keep in touch with us or stay in the loop. I'm going to put these in the chat, but at NYC Urban Ag are actually the social media handles, and we're going to be rolling these things out as we go forward. And as I said, I think the launch is going to be sometime in September. So yeah, I just think overall there is a whole lot of possibility here. And there was also some talk earlier from Henry as well as Christine about just sort of the multiple positive effects of sort of urban agriculture. And I was visiting some urban garden classrooms around the city, and it was really interesting to see the way these kids engaged with these programs. They were really happy about it. They were excited about it, and they were taking ownership in it. And I was talking to one kid who said something really funny. He said, yeah, at first I heard it was going to be plants, and I was like, oh, that sounds boring. And I said, well, how do you feel now? And he said, oh, it's great. And he's from Haiti, actually, and he said it actually reminded me of my childhood in Haiti, which I thought was really great. That was really powerful kind of a connection that he probably wouldn't have had otherwise. And I also noticed it was fostering these other things that we keep giving all this lip service to trying to get kids to learn these 21st century skill sets, right? Collaboration, critical thinking, creativity, being able to work well in a group, sort of thing. There's been a lot of lip service toward this, and urban agriculture does it very naturally. They're all focused on this project. They're all doing it. They're all comparing notes. If there's something happening with one plant that's, that's not good, they're trying to troubleshoot that. So it was just really interesting to see this thing happening really naturally. That I think people have been putting all this emphasis on, right? And so I also think, it could be the kind of thing that gives kids, young kids who are kind of questioning what they're doing in school all day long, every day. I think it maybe possibly gives them a reason to go to school even, if they can get excited about something like this and get onto a track like this early on in life. I think that's a really constructive thing. And I think it could lead to some really terrific outcomes as far as where they wind up, which is great. So obviously the Office of Urban Agriculture would like to help with that too, in terms of classroom gardens and in terms of CTE, career and technical education, in middle school and high school as well. So we're going to be looking at that. Food systems, community gardens, obviously there will be a big focus on. One of Henry's 6th grade recommendations was to protect community gardens, which of course I agree with, and we need to investigate that. You can't do everything that you want to do in a city like New York. There's a lot of competition and there's very little land. We also need to build housing, we need to build housing and things like that, affordable housing. But so there will be times when we can't really necessarily move the needle, but there will be times when we can, I think also. And I think certainly we can certainly address concerns, and we can look at things that the city has the capability of doing, right? And so just to finish up, basically this office, I think at its best will be a portal sort of into city policy and city government for the urban agriculture ecosystem. So I'm looking forward to engaging all of you actually on that. Great to meet everybody here. I already know Henry, but yeah, so, I'm excited about it. I think there's a lot of possibility here. I think there's a world of possibility. So thanks for the invite. I appreciate being here.
Definitely. We appreciate you spending, your time with us, Mr. Burr, and also sharing the exciting plans which you have in the city, in the New York City. Let's go with Christina, if that is okay for you. You're the ladies first. What do you think? Is it good for you?
I was typing a question to Evan, so I didn't hear the question.
Perfect.
Sorry.
Perfect.
Yeah.
No problem. So if you would like to, you can ask even now the question, and
Sure.
then
Okay.
we would go into some more.
Yeah, perfect. Evan, I just wanted to ask you, I think the vision of the city is incredible. And it actually is, like, for me, such a blueprint for what other cities, around the world could be doing. Are there plans, the experience and learnings with other cities, and create this kind of like collaborative ecosystem of visionary leaders?
I'm so glad you brought that up. Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up. Henry and I have been talking about this for several months now, about basically involving other cities. Actually, Henry was the first guy to tell me about the Paris experiments and those interesting things that they're doing over there via that contest and stuff. So he's got a great idea for that in terms of, in terms of doing something like that. But we had this idea also of actually convening people, basically convening cities nationally and also around the world for a kind of a conference, maybe here in New York, where people could inform on practices and things that worked and things that didn't work, and just kind of share that kind of information. Because I think you're right. Actually, here's what's so interesting about this. This is a world conversation. If you're right, as you all know, I don't need to tell you that, but it just I mean, that's just really impressed me. This is a world conversation that's going on, and kind of everyone's doing the same thing. Everyone's trying to get into this space and trying to shape it favorably for their cities, and trying to figure out what works and what doesn't work, and how to feed people, how to engage kids. Everyone's kind of trying to do the same things. And so I think it could be great to have everyone together talking about this, for sure. That's so, that could be on the agenda. Yeah.
I think it's a great idea, Evan. And I definitely want to also introduce you to Martine at the City of Amsterdam, because they do an exchange between Amsterdam and Paris related to that. We had a roundtable where farmers from Amsterdam and Paris shared, and then they had a tour of one and a tour of other. So there's some frameworks that we could look at, but it'd be great to have NYC host like a city,
yeah, let's do it.
That's for urban ag, because, there's no city that's stepped in that leadership position. I guess the Milan sort of food pact is the closest example to that, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
But there's lots that can be built on from that. Super cool idea.
Beautiful. So exciting also news to hear that. And maybe we start now with the question to Christina. We have also quite some comments in the chat. So what is, because you mentioned several segments on your slide, what is like the top area where you see most developments coming from in agri-tech innovation?
Yeah, that's such a great question. So right now, the hot space is alternative proteins, and that's being funded like kind of everywhere globally. And that's a lot of the hype that we're seeing in the media. A few years ago, it was AgTech, but that's lost its luster a little bit because of a specific reason. Farmers. It's really hard to convince farmers to purchase AgTech products. There tend to be like a skeptical demographic. The value proposition often isn't clear in the very short term. And so AgTech, while that was a darling of investors, kind of, when food and agriculture became the hot space it's lost its luster, and we're still trying to win back the VC world about the opportunity in this space. I know that, there's been some also like kind of that I think Henry actually did a great article on this, like the hype curve. There's been some like overvaluations, overexcitement about some of the vertical farming solutions too, which again have created a little bit of disillusionment if you follow that, hype cycle. But it doesn't mean we should give up on these spaces. They are incredible spaces filled with innovation opportunities. And I think like the more that we can educate investors, the more that we can get them to see that this is a play. The fundamentals are there. We have the population, aspects. We have the environmental aspects and all of the, demographic shifts that are happening and the consumer demands that are increasing. So all of those mean that this is a sector ripe for reinvention and ready for investment, but we just have to educate investors a little bit about the realistic timelines and the realities of, new innovation uptake in these spaces. But right now, I would definitely emphasize alternative proteins are all the rage, but we're seeing again, a little bit that, hype cycle and disillusionment potential that can happen because there is again, a lot of, people overplaying what the possibilities are, what CapEx is. And, these are things that we all just need to get better at doing. And again, through more open conversations and sharing, I think we can, this is such an important sector to get right. And we can really make sure that the investment dollars are going to the right places and really helping all of us benefit. Because of course, when things go wrong, the whole sector can suffer.
Definitely. Great. So with this, I would thank you very much, Christine. I would go to a question from the chat. It's from Henry. Henry, I saw you were reacting with your sharing your article on the predictions. However, maybe we can also once again repeat it for everybody. So what is the top vertical farming expo to visit that you would recommend?
Okay, so yeah, we actually feature the events we recommend on agritecture.com/events. For vertical farming, I would say in North America, Indoor AgCon is the biggest, best one where you can see tech exhibited. If you're looking in the Middle East, AgriME is coming up. That's a good one. The Food for Future Summit, which Christine and I participated in, also has a pretty heavy vertical farming focus on it. So those are some of the events that you can look at in Dubai that feature the Middle East. For Europe, it's all about green tech. I mean, green tech is the biggest one in the world and the biggest one in Europe. And that's where you're going to see all the latest innovations across greenhouses and vertical farms. I highly recommend, you go to one of those, depending on the region you're in. Those are the best ones. But there's a lot of other events that are maybe smaller or more specific. When it comes to food and agriculture and the food system overall, Christine's event, Thought for Food, and the Generation Fest happening September 30th in New York City is the best. I mean, again, you can imagine how many events I go to, like literally so many events, but I've been to Christine's event every single year since the first year I went, and it's the best. It's like, it recharges me. I meet so many people from corporate to policy to entrepreneurs. It's diverse, which is so important as well. Young, older, every color you can imagine. And it's just an incredible time. And you learn so much about the science, business, policy, everything. So you cannot miss her events. And even their like little webinars that they do, all their stuff is just amazing.
It has to be energy like similar to the presentations which you shared. So I believe it's amazing. And hopefully I get to the upcoming ones, to some of them at least. There was also a second part of the question, just maybe if you can in 30, okay, maybe 45 seconds answer that one, and then we would move to another question to another speaker. So does green tech, AFVF and global vertical farming show cut in, or are there any better ones? From
Okay, so you want me to answer
the
about
question.
those specific events? The AVF, I mean, Green Tech is the one I mentioned. A global vertical farming show, I believe, is an online one that's not a specific event that I'm aware of. AVF is Association Vertical Farming. I'll just say I don't really endorse their events.
Okay.
I'll just leave it.
Good. Thank you so much. So with this, there was also a comment regarding farming in Bolivia, where Felix Angulo. I'm just going to read the question out. We are working with edible mushrooms in Bolivia, oyster mushrooms. We don't have a lot of mycology labs in the country. Any advice to import new types of mushroom spawns? I believe it's for you, Henry.
I'll drop the email of our mushroom expert on our team that you can ask, and Justin would be happy to give you an attempt at an answer to that. But Justin's our new mushroom expert, and you can ask him all things mushrooms, and he'll get back to you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Henry. It sounds very interesting, like mushroom expert, but it's amazing that you have a person like this on board. And actually, now we had several questions to you. I would move to Ivan, if that is okay for you. Perfect.
Sure.
Ivan, you mentioned that there is a lot of preparation in terms of people being allocated, resources being allocated. There is like planning behind that. Is there also some regulation that you see maybe coming around this topic? Like, for example, in Europe, there are different initiatives. In Germany, for example, it's not directly connected, but already in the area of green infrastructure, where there are mandatory green roofs, for example, on every new building, etc. How does it look in the US? Maybe if you can share with us a little bit some insights, if you know. It's a broad question, so as much as you can share.
So I can actually speak to New York City basically, and essentially, yeah, you actually bring up a really good point. One of the things that we want to do in helping to foster urban agriculture startups, especially, but also current urban ag businesses, to help them be able to grow and proliferate, and help them choose New York City over certain other places where they might set up facilities. There are things that we need to confront for sure. We need to look at zoning laws that are outmoded and could be changed. And so there's I don't want to get too far out over my skis on this stuff, because we're gonna be shaping the agenda pretty soon for this office. But that's a big piece of this for sure, trying to foster urban ag startups in particularly in disinvested areas. And I was going to bring this up earlier. There's a strong sort of an equity lens that is going to be applied to all of this, basically, across the board. And what's so interesting about this is that you see all this entrepreneurial spirit for this from these young people, which is really amazing. They're like 22, 23 years old. They're deadly serious and they're focused. In fact, they're too serious. I used to try to make them laugh on Zoom meetings sometimes, but they're doing these great things. They're just jumping into the space, and they're just, essentially with no help, and they're trying to start businesses, which I think is a really fantastic thing. And so I think the city, we ought to try to figure out ways to help them with that, because there really isn't a whole lot of help for that actually right now. And Henry had a good point once when he was saying they did a poll, actually, I guess Agritecture polled surveyed some businesses, urban ag businesses, and I think it was between 40 and 50% of them, possibly 60% of them, I think it was, said that they would have made different decisions actually regarding equipment and a whole host of other things had they known better, right? So had they just had some guidance actually at the very beginning, even without resources, right? Just to have guidance for that, I think is a big deal. But you got back to, to get back to your question, which is basically about current laws and regulations, right? If I'm getting you right on that, in terms of what could be addressed, I think we have to take a look at all of that across the board. And one really great thing is I'm getting a sense that the city council actually here, there's a whole new class of elected council members actually as of this year, and it is a class of people that are stellar, and they seem to be focused on this area actually quite a lot, which is really great to see. There have been a couple of urban ag bills that have already been introduced actually in the council, and so there just seems to be a real sort of desire and a real will to get a lot of this done. So as Christine was saying, I think there really is a window of opportunity actually in front of us to start examining things like this. Like, how can we change certain zoning laws to make it easier, on these urban ag businesses. And, the mayor was rolling out provisions earlier. He was rolling out initiatives and so forth, starting at the beginning of the year to try to help small businesses, right? They were going to try to roll back penalties and have cure periods instead of immediate penalties and fines for small businesses. So he is of a mind actually to do that really anyway, right, for small business across the board. But I think we need an area of focus on urban agriculture, specifically startups. So yeah, we're going to be looking to try to help that, foster that basically wherever we can.
Thank you so much, Ivan, for this response. We have one raised hand also in the audience. So Mr. Giulio Campo. Giulio, would you like to ask your question and unmute yourself?
Hello, hi everybody.
Hello, I can hear you
yes,
very well.
greetings from Brazil. Yes, I have a question that we're debating in Brazil. We're working on the agroecological systems versus traditional agro business systems, and given that our crops or vegetation is not adapted, is not resilient to the 1.52 degrees increase in temperature, and that working on a systemic structure like agroecological system provides greater resilience than working on the traditional agribusiness or a system or a greenhouse system or a vertical farm system, which will require more energy eventually to keep the temperature of the environment within the acceptable limits for the crops. Shouldn't we be looking first, two questions. One, isn't there a possible downfall in the future for some high-tech solutions because of we have a simple physiological problem with the plants, with the crops? And two, shouldn't we go a little bit to indigenous solutions, a little bit more to traditional low-tech solutions, but more systemic solutions that allows the crops, the plant itself, the vegetable to adapt or be resilient into 1.2, 1.5, 2 degrees Celsius increasing temperature without we having to add extra energy, extra material, extra resources just to keep that local climate for the vegetation adequate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Giulio. So I believe it would be, I'm not quite sure if I completely got the first part of the question. Happy if you can make it more precise in the chat so we can also maybe take it from there. Giulio, thanks a lot. I believe it's a question for Christine regarding, agri-tech innovation or innovation in agriculture regarding resilience of crops. What are the approaches over there? I mean, we know Giulio also personally, we work a lot together. He's an unsustainability expert professor, basically in supply chain sustainability. So it's a kind of interesting element that he's now touching upon in terms of, how sustainable is building out large scale vertical farms or different concepts in terms of investing in the resources versus more traditional methods of farming. Yeah.
I mean, I think that these are important questions to ask, and we need to keep pushing our thinking and asking these questions, but also embracing, the multidimensional types of solutions that we need to get ourselves out of these unprecedented challenges that we're facing. And I think that so much of the, world of food and agriculture has been dominated by kind of polarized, it's this or that type of discussions. And what I think is exciting is a future where we can start to mash up different ideas, different ideologies, different approaches, and create something new that's better than the sum of its parts. So I don't think the discussion has to be soil-based versus vertical farms, you know, versus aquaponics. There's space for all of these different types of solutions. And there's also space for these questions to be asked so that we can all, in our respective worlds and domains, learn from each other and be, you know, kind of moving towards this goal. Because that famous quote on Spaceship Earth, there are no passengers, we are all crew. So these are really, like I said, really important fundamental questions, but it's time for a new type of conversation about how we can address those and integrate solutions in new ways. And I see a lot of young people very open-minded to this. And like I said in that one slide, they're integrating indigenous techniques with the most cutting edge AI platforms. They're taking regenerative ag and asking themselves, would a gene edited crop fit into this? You know, they're looking at vertical farms and saying CO2 is a big cost. Can I capture CO2 from the atmosphere and use that in my vertical farming system and solve two birds with one stone? So these are the kinds of things that, like, I think can push ourselves forward.
Definitely. Thank you very much. Henry, would you like to add something? We have like 2
Yeah, I
minutes
know.
left, so.
I know we're out of time, but I think Christine said it so well. And again, like what Thought for Food does is they really embrace that multidimensional thinking digitally and in person events that's so critical to solving these problems. And I think it's sad, not only the sort of polarization, but that we have this ideas that we need to find a panacea. We need to find a cure-all, a single bullet that's going to solve these problems. It's ridiculous. There's nothing like that around. So we need to look at each of these things individually and find the middle ground between them. Another article I'm posting in the chat is about the hybridization of agriculture and that the lines are going to get more blurred through this. But I will say, to your point, the person who asked the question, I would love if we could grow all our food regeneratively and if we could use a minimal amount of tech to empower that. That's the ideal for me, if I had my ideal vision of the food system. And that might sound crazy from someone that works in vertical farming a lot. But to me, I think that is the ideal. That's where we're going to have the highest quality product and sequester carbon and have better, you know, life for farmers. I think that's the ideal. But we are playing a catch up for the consequences of what we do and what past generations have done. And we have to also be honest about the reality of adapting to climate change. And regenerative agriculture, I think one of the things I talk about is it needs to push its business case a little bit more. It needs to have more business plans available. It needs to be more appealing to investors, and it's getting there. There's a lot of people doing that. But for me and my clients who are planning farms and they want to build businesses, it's very, very difficult for me to push them to regen ag when I say, oh, in 7 years, you're going to start having this abundance of product, but it could totally fail or not. And we don't actually have really accurate yield data. And so it starts to get very difficult to make that business case in a world that is largely about money. So we need to find that balance. So much more evolution and collaboration needed there.
Definitely agree. And I think more and more in the, in the changing conditions when we have all these extreme weather events, it's a big risk. And definitely it's for me also a mosaic of solutions that will help people then to transition to the next stage. Okay, we have 1 minute past 5 o'clock. Do we have still one more time for one more question? Are you up for it? Henry, Christina, Ivan, what do you think?
Yes, I have 1 more minute.
One more minute. Let's go. Then we have Michael Boyle. Michael, would you like to ask a question, and then we make a
really fast
shortcut.
Sure, thank you very much. I would like to piggyback on that of what Henry just mentioned, tied to investment. And could we possibly say that we are looking for the wrong type of investment? If we're really talking about regenerative, we're talking about local investment where people are actually able to get the returns of that of what they're investing. Maybe the model's wrong. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think the things we value, and again, I think we have like an obsession with billionaires and like looking up to them and looking up to tech as solutions. Like we value a lot of the wrong things in society. I'm a little bit of a realist about that. I think we can work to change that, but I'm less of like a total revolution rebel sort of one. So return on impact is an amazing, thing, a different way to think about ROI, a new way that Christine just mentioned. I think we should encourage that. We should have those discussions. We should talk about that. But again, from a pragmatic perspective, my business is helping people, make enough money to make sure that their investment comes back. a lot of times they don't actually want to hear about, they don't want to pay me for the services to understand the social and environmental impact, unfortunately. So my clients just want that investment. So as a company, we've had to decide how we can make changes there. We publish sustainability guidelines. We give them free sustainability assessments. We remind them of the trade-offs and the impact of different methods. And that's how we sort of sleep at night. And that's, I think, what anybody can do is you can be transparent, you can investigate it, you can talk about it, and not just talk about the money alone. And that's what we try to do.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Henry, for giving feedback. Christina, Ivan, last comments, and then we would close the call, close the round. Christina? Would you like
Sure. I mean, yeah, definitely. I think it's time, we have to uproot the status quo. Like, it's time for business as unusual, because we are in unprecedented times, not only because of all the challenges we face, but also because the opportunities we have and the power for all of us as individuals to create change is so great. So that, to me, that convergence of like the technologies, the right values, the need is coming together. That means that we can really create a tidal wave of change. And I'm really excited to see what is to come. But we need to also push ourselves to ask tough questions, to engage new types of minds, whether that be young people, whether that be emerging economies. And we need to also be brave to collaborate and, think multispectrally, as we say at Thought for Food. So thank you a lot. And please do follow up with questions. And of course, if you want to find out more about Generation Fest, do get in touch, and we look forward to meeting you soon.
Thank you so much, Christina, for your thoughts. Ivan, last comments from your side on this.
Sure. Just to follow on what Christine actually just said, I think there's a lot of exciting possibility. I mean, incredibly exciting possibility pretty much everywhere you look, in all fronts, actually, urban ag, in the urban ag ecosystem, actually in New York City, but also around the world, the cities across the country. And I think there is a huge opportunity to actually get things done, because I think this has moved into sort of the mainstream in terms of the way that most people are beginning to look at it. And I think there can be a whole lot that happens in the next few years that actually winds up shaping sort of the way that we do this. And that's why I think it's an extremely important time, and hoping to keep everybody engaged with this new Office of Urban Agriculture. This mayor is actually prioritizing this office, and for the first time ever in the city's history, we have real top-down leadership on this, actually, from the mayor of New York. So that's exciting stuff. You can follow us again on @NYC Urban Ag. And we look forward to communicating more and doing more of these. Absolutely. Exciting. It's, inspiring stuff. It's been great to be with you.
Thank you so much, Ivan, for taking the time and being here with us and sharing this exciting news. Thank you, everybody. Christina, Henry, Sayeda, Ivan, of course, and to everybody that was on the call for the questions and your time and attention. I wish you a very good rest of the day. There will be a follow-up on social media with some content around this, so you get some information also out of the discussion, the presentation shared. And with this, I would wish you a very good rest of the day, and see you on the next one.
Okay, bye-bye.